Hi, my name is Sabrina Fernandez and I'm speaking from Brazil. I want to talk a bit today about the situation around authoritarian governments and the kind of image management that they try to do to the rest of the world. It's always the same story when the people in the country, they're denouncing the many problems of their governments, and even the mainstream media in the country ends up talking about it. But then the leaders, they only get really concerned when it reaches international headlines, or maybe when it comes to places like the United Nations. So here we go for one more video for the Thesis 11 English series. Just recently, heads of state made an address to the United Nations General Assembly. This time, because of the pandemic, obviously the addresses, they were made via video. And then we have Jair Bolsonaro, who's the president of Brazil. He took the opportunity to outright lie about all sorts of things that anyone who actually follows up on Brazilian politics or who has an inch of sound judgment in their bodies, they will know it's just absurd. If you didn't listen to his speech, and I don't blame you, here's a few lies that he told that day. Basically, he lied about the fact that he completely neglected the coronavirus and made up some really weird story about trying to do things, but the judiciary and the governors, they were getting his way. If you've seen my last video in English here, or even just kept up with the news, you know Bolsonaro basically abandoned Brazilian people when it came to the pandemic, and he didn't even really want to establish proper emergency income. So you know how ridiculous it is that he had the guts to claim that he'd given an emergency amount of $1,000 per family, when even if we add up all of the months together, we know that the average amount won't really reach that, and that Bolsonaro didn't want to do in the first place, and then after he just wanted to give much less, and the payments were even delayed. So to use a Brazilian expression here, this goes to show that he has a huge wood face, cara de pau. Cynical. But it keeps getting worse. You've heard perhaps about the fires in the Amazon and another biome in Brazil, Pantanal. Last year, I made a video in English about how the Bolsonaro environmental politics is just a disaster, and it still is. But Bolsonaro just went and he lied about indigenous people being to blame for the disastrous and criminal fires, when we know very well that agribusiness is involved. But he won't say that, of course, because he's in bed with agribusiness. So it's ridiculous. He's complaining about some disinformation campaign against him, but this is exactly what he's doing. Anyway, it's a lot of lies, but he wasn't the only one. Duterte from the Philippines, he went along the same lines. They're trying to discredit this very democratic government kind of thing, and Duterte, he just wants to rid the Philippines from terrorism. Except that he's included the popular opposition in his view of terrorism. Did you know he got emergency powers to fight the pandemic, and then he ended up using them to further persecute his critics? Duterte is known for using moral panics, and his speech was full of it. It was about terrorism being at large, they're even using our children. So basically, this means don't believe those human rights people when they're complaining about me, okay? And then here I like to point out also Piñera from Chile. Maybe you remember the huge wave of protests across Chile last year. Well, Piñera was ruthless, and he has been ruthless. We're talking about reports of torture, lots of physical aggression, people going missing, which, you know, when it comes to state repression, is not really about people disappearing, but being disappeared. Now, during the pandemic, the repression against the Mapuche people has made headlines again, with Mapuche leaders who are political prisoners in Chile, about them going on hunger strike and everything. But then, Piñera told a different story in his address to the General Assembly. He claimed that abuses were just small exceptions by some groups that will be punished, and that the state took every precaution to protect everyone's human rights. Because you know, rubber bullet in the eye, this is just a staple in human rights protection. There's also the interim president of Bolivia, Agnes, who had the guts to say that she's the one standing up to authoritarianism. It is now known to everyone that what happened in Bolivia was a coup. We knew it. But now everyone knows it was a coup, a religious fundamentalist coup. There's political persecution, people who have been exiled, violence, people going missing. But she goes up there and she says that her way is the way of democracy and freedom. And I think it's important to highlight this because this is evidence of how much we need critical thinking. Authoritarian leaders, they aren't just going to go out there and say they only represent the elites and they only care for elections if they can tinker with them. They won't say that, so it's your job to know that. I also want to mention Erdogan from Turkey here, because his speech stressed wanting sincere dialogue with Greece over their current disputes. But you should know that when it comes to domestic politics, we know of the intense persecution of Turkish intellectuals, of the Turkish left. This involves detentions, academics losing their jobs, and even getting their passports confiscated. Let me just interrupt here really quickly. This YouTube channel is mostly in Portuguese, as you know, but I want to keep this playlist in English alive. And also there are other videos with subtitles in English in a separate playlist. So if you're into leftist analysis, mostly from the South, I don't know, subscribe and maybe check it out. But of course, I have to talk about Trump, right? Trump's address was like Bolsonaro's, this huge piece of fantasy that makes you wonder how everything actually works inside their heads. Because I do wonder if when people lie for a living to manipulate, to hold on to power, if they end up believing some of the things that they say. So Trump basically downplayed the pandemic, because 200,000 deaths are nothing to worry about. He actually said that when it comes to young people, it affects virtually nobody. Open up your schools, everybody. Let the virus into your schools, everybody. Trump, like Bolsonaro, he claimed his administration has been good for the environment too, which is some sort of really bad joke. And of course, Trump had to go all beware the Chinese and the Chinese virus and hold them accountable and things like that. But the thing is, these guys are not exceptions. Right-wing leaders lie to the General Assembly all the time, and it is kind of interesting to think on why they do that. Because some of them, they actually believe that the UN is part of some sort of globalist conspiracy, and Brazil's foreign affairs minister, he actually does think that. Yet they go to the UN and they lie to the UN in an effort to justify the bad press and defend themselves. And they do that because they're afraid mostly of economic consequences. It's not like the UN is amazing and beautiful and all for social justice. The UN is full of problems. It's part of the status quo. It's not about changing it. And I myself, I have published in the past about how the UN's process for climate change negotiations is biased towards large corporations and everything. But one way or another, the UN is a large body of governance, and optics here. Optics counts a lot in this political business. It's a bit of a tug of war, and they want to see who wins at this match of accusations and excuses, especially because, and this is important, most of those speeches tend to also be a message to their own people, to the people in their own countries. When Bolsonaro goes up there, in this case when he sends a pre-recorded video to the General Assembly, he's also telling Brazilians that he can go up there and he can lie through his teeth. Trump can address this entity that's supposed to actually hold him accountable, and he can lie and he can treat it like his own Twitter account. We know that speeches to the UN, General Assembly and whatnot, they're used by heads of state to justify their courses of action, and this can be a big mess. One example of this is Colin Powell talking to the UN Security Council as Secretary of State of the United States. This was in 2003. And this was when he said to the UN that he had no doubt in his mind that Iraq had nuclear weapons, had a nuclear weapons program, when he didn't. He knew he was lying when he said that they had solid evidence that Iraq had biological weapons, but it was an important step for opening the doors to the war on Iraq. This goes to show the huge limitations of the UN process, and not just the Security Council that people want to reform. This is about a governance that can do some good. I'm not denying that, okay? I even know people who work at different UN institutions in really important programs, but as an organization, it's always going to be stuck in the status quo because it was created by the status quo. The UN can help with aid, with guidelines, with resources, even with spaces for debate, but the countries themselves, they don't go there to collaborate. Because those delegations they're there from a bureaucratic position, not really a solidarity, internationalist, let's change the world kind of place. And I think I maybe should come back with a video about solidarity and real internationalism, why not? So I'm finishing recording this video. Not everyone has addressed the GA yet, but you can look it up and you can see if maybe Modi from India owned up to all of the persecution and incitement of hate he's involved in, or not. They're going to go up there, and if they're going to lie to our faces, it's our job to ensure that we get proper analysis and listen to the people in those countries. Here in the description, you can find a link to my website with references and suggestions, and I even included pieces by my colleagues from my postdoc group on authoritarianism during the pandemic, so don't forget to check it out. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.